So welcome everyone. This is, we're nearing the end of this module, Exploring Common Prayers and Practices, and this is my third class with all of you in terms of going through these last remaining teachings on this subject. Let me go ahead and begin with prayers. Tonight what we'll do is recite the usual prayers. This one I think we've been doing this just once, just to save a little bit of time, and I think we can do that again tonight, just to make sure we have enough time to cover the material. So we'll recite this praise to Shakyamuni Buddha one time. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. And then the short mandala offering. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. And then finally, refuge and bodhicitta, which we'll do the first time in English and then two more times in the Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi daki chunyen gipe sonam gi dola penshir sangye drupar shok Sangye chodang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi Daki Chanyan Gipe Sonam Gi Dola Panchir Sangye Drupar Shok. Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and do a short meditation. As usual, we'll spend the first few minutes in silent meditation on the breath in order to focus the mind a bit, letting go of whatever distractions we might have from the day. And whenever the mind does wander away, just guiding the mind gently back to the breath. And after a few minutes of this, I'll come in and lead you in a short reflection to set our motivation for tonight. So I'll ring the bowl here from my side, and I don't know what you hear when I actually do this, but whatever you hear, that's the start of the meditation. And of course, I'll do this at the conclusion as well. So now let's set our motivation of bodhicitta for tonight's class. And in last week's class, we went through in brief the King of Prayers, this amazing aspirational prayer that we can use to enhance our bodhicitta. We're not going to do a deep reflection on that, but think about all of the wonderful qualities that we can accomplish for ourselves as we progress on the path. All the wisdom, compassion, loving kindness, patience, generosity, enthusiasm, morality, all of these things we can enhance to a limitless degree. And we can become just like the great bodhisattvas of the past, such as Samantabhadra, Manjushri, and so on. And we can eventually accomplish the state of complete and perfect enlightenment. But as we're seeing in this module, it depends upon not just our study and meditation of the Lamrim, but also our working with these practices and prayers to purify our minds, to completely remove all of the obstacles and obscurations, as well as to enhance and develop all of the positive potential that we need to actualize these qualities. But it all begins certainly with the motivation of bodhicitta, with this aspiration that all the Buddhas of the past, all the bodhisattvas of the past and present, all have developed this same mind, this same aspiration, this deep wish to be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. And then with that as our guiding motivation, we determine to become a Buddha in order to accomplish that. So set that motivation of bodhicitta very firmly in your heart within this idea of everything we can accomplish, that all these various qualities that are embodied in the King of Prayers and many of the other practices we engage in, thinking that we're here to accomplish these amazing feats, to become a bodhisattva and to eventually become a Buddha, so we then can help all sentient beings to do the same. Okay, again, welcome everyone to tonight's class. I think before we get started with the material for tonight, which is going to be solely on the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, I wanted to see if there were any questions from the last 2 weeks, last week in particular, because I went pretty much to the end of our time together with Mike commenting on things, and we didn't have time for very many questions. So were there any questions that you had? Again, last week what we covered was the method to transform a suffering life into happiness, which was Lama Tsongkhapa, or Lama Zopa Rinpoche's beginning practice for starting our day. And then we went on to talk about food offering prayers, the more extensive offering prayers, requesting prayers, and then the King of Prayers. So we talked about a number of prayers. Any questions or comments on anything from last week before we begin the other topic? So I hope all of you have had a chance to take a look at those prayers again. Yes, Mary Jo, please unmute yourself and can ask a
Thank
question.
you.
Sure.
So about the food offering, you had made a brief comment about, we offer the food, and then there was something, and it was so quick I didn't catch it, about, okay, it's offered to the Buddhas, but then we're taking it for ourselves. Can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Sure. No problem, Mary Jo. So when we're offering food that we're going to eat, food or drink that we're going to eat, then what we're doing, again, with that visualization that was mentioned in the prayer book, is that we are visualizing the Buddha, who is inseparable from our Guru, at our heart center. And as we're partaking of that initial food in particular, though you can do it throughout all of your eating and drinking, make sure that we have a very definite concept of offering that first part to the guru who's at our heart. Of course, we have to eat it in order to do that. So there's no problem with eating or drinking that first amount that we are offering to the triple gem, to the Buddha, the gurus, and so on. So with food that we are partaking of in that way, there's really not the problem that I was talking about of having some pollution from having offered to the three jewels and so on, and then partaking of that ourselves. That problem comes into play when we are offering something on an altar or even as part of a puja, other than when we offer sok at a Guru Puja. And no doubt Venerable Yonten touched on this. I haven't had a chance to look at all of her recordings of what she taught on, that all of you had the opportunity to look at together over these last many Tuesdays. But when we offer something to the merit field, to the Buddhas, to Tara, to Medicine Buddha, and so on, when we offer things in that way, it's kind of like we're giving it to them. But then if we partake of it, without some sort of way of purifying that, we do receive some pollution from having offered something to somebody that we then take away from them in a sense. Again, it's not that the Tara and the Medicine Buddha and all these other Buddhas, need our offerings, and they don't partake of them per se, because they're blissed out all the time. They don't need our offerings. We make the offerings to them out of our wish to accumulate merit, using them as a merit field, a ground upon which we can generate that positive potential. So the technique for doing that, again, was in the prayer book. I think it was on page 61. There is a mantra that you can recite after you've offered things on your altar, whether it's, again, part of a puja or part of a daily offering that you do. Anything that you're going to partake of yourself or that others are going to partake of, you recite that mantra 7 times, and then you blow on the food gently, or the water, whatever drinks, and then it can be offered to or given to whoever is going to partake of it. So just to distinguish again, if it's food that you're blessing as you're going to eat your meal, then you do this visualization of offering it to the Guru, the Buddha at your heart. And that doesn't require that mantra to purify pollution, because that's how you offer it to the Buddhas, is by partaking of it and visualizing it as nectar that goes down, because is received by the three jewels and by your gurus. But if you are offering something that you have previously offered on your altar or as part of, again, a puja, as I said, other than the sok offerings. When sok offerings are made, they are offered to everyone in general, so they aren't offered just to the three jewels and so on. So those can be you can partake of those without that mantra. But that mantra is very beneficial to remove any pollution we might have from taking those offerings that we've offered to the merit field. So does that make some sense, Mary Jo? Is that clear?
Yes, perfect. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Yeah. And
Thank
again,
you.
that mantra is Tayata idam vini ratna pemani pranini swaha. And again, you just recite that 7 times. Again, you'll find it. I'm pretty sure it was page 61 of the prayer book was where that was located, the essential FPMT prayer book. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well then let's get into Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So I do have a few slides prepared for tonight, but mostly what we're going to be doing is going through the actual practice and just kind of page by page, looking at what is all in that. Again, this is the final topic that I'm teaching on. Just to remind you, next Tuesday, we're going to go through pretty much all of what's on here. We're going to start with blessing the speech and daily mantras, do some of the other mantras. Again, some of them, actually some of the other ones we may not do because they're like blessing the feet and things like that. But then we'll go into the method to transform a suffering life. We won't do the food offering prayers, but we'll do an extensive offering practice as part of the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. We probably won't do requesting prayers, but then we'll finish with the King of Prayers. I'm hoping I can fit all that into an hour and a half next week. We'll see how I do. So I want to share first some comments from Geshe Rabten. And by the way, you will be getting a set of commentaries tomorrow with the materials. That includes a commentary by Geshe Rabten that I would very much encourage you to read, because I won't have the opportunity to comment on every aspect of this practice. This practice, this Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, is sometimes called Ganden Lagyema, Ganden means this land of bliss, Tushita, that is where Maitreya Buddha resides. And Lagyema, the Lagye is referring to the hundreds of deities, or 100 deities it's sometimes called, that abide in this pure realm. So it says here, both Ganden Lagyema, the Guru Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, and the Guru Puja, Lama Chopa, that again Venerable Yonten taught on, are Guru Yoga in connection with Lama Tsongkhapa. The only difference between them is in the elaboration of the words. In meaning, they are exactly the same. They are both a Guru Yoga that we are doing with the Guru of this tradition, Lama Tsongkhapa, who I'll talk about shortly. The qualities we need to develop most are these three: wisdom, compassion, and power. Oftentimes we talk about the two wings of a bird being wisdom and compassion, but we need also kind of this third element of power, which is embodied in sort of the skillful way that Buddhists help others through developing their minds. The practice of this Guru Yoga in connection with Lama Tsongkhapa is the best method to accomplish all three. Through the practice of this Guru Yoga, we can accomplish these three attributes of the Buddha, but particularly his wisdom. Lama Tsongkhapa has a strong connection to Manjushri and to the wisdom aspect of the path, but we're going to be working with Lama Tsongkhapa being the embodiment of all three of these: wisdom, compassion, and power. In ultimate nature, Lama Tsongkhapa is form combined with the wisdom, power, and compassion of every Buddha. Right? So he is a form, a being who appeared in this world. His dates are from 1357 to 1419. He appeared in this world as the embodiment of these three qualities. When Lama Tsongkhapa manifests in the wrathful form of a highest yoga tantra deity, it is Yamantaka, which I won't go into much, but that's one of the highest yoga tantra deities that is practiced in this Gelug tradition. And that is the sort of wrathful form of Tsongkhapa as well as of Manjushri. Then it goes on to say, when he appears in the peaceful form of a bodhisattva or a Buddha, it is Manjushri. Many of you are familiar with Manjushri, this sort of 16-year-old orange-colored being who has a flaming sword in one hand and a lotus holding a scripture, a text, the Prajnaparamita, Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, in the other. So this is the peaceful aspect. Then the third, when he appears in the form of a human being as a master guru of many sentient beings, it is Lama Tsongkhapa. So in aspect, we can say that there's different manifestations of this enlightened being that we call Lama Tsongkhapa, the embodiment of these three qualities: wisdom, power, and compassion, depending upon whether it's wrathful, peaceful, or simply as a being to help others on their path, to have a more common kind of way of appearing in the world. Okay. The full life story of Lama Tsongkhapa is beyond explanation. It comes in such a big volume that it cannot be finished in a few hours. Also, it is not necessary at this time to give you a full biography of Lama Tsongkhapa, but Lama Tsongkhapa is one with Manjushri. Of course, Manjushri is that wisdom aspect of the Buddhas. You can say Lama Tsongkhapa is one with all Buddhas in a sense, that same developed, fully developed mind and the ability to manifest in a variety of forms, as we saw on that previous slide. I might mention that, let me take it off screen for just a moment. There are a couple of biographies out there of Lama Tsongkhapa. You can certainly find some on the internet that are very short. There was a more recent book that was published that I haven't had the opportunity to read yet, this rather large volume called Tsongkhapa, Buddha in the Land of Snows by Thupten Jinpa. And he used all sorts of references, resources to put that together. It's supposed to be quite excellent. But then there's an older version of a sort of biography with some translations of texts that Robert Thurman did. Both of those are in your book list. And then I'm also sending on a few other documents that you can use to refer to find out more about Lama Tsongkhapa, to really inspire you in this practice. Lama Tsongkhapa, again, is the founder of the Gelug tradition of the Tibetan Buddhism, the last of the four schools of Tibetan Buddhism to develop. The initial one was the Nyingma, then the Kagyu, then the Sakya, and Lama Tsongkhapa studied all three of those traditions and was primarily a disciple of a Sakya Lama, Rangawa. But essentially, he didn't plan to develop his own sort of school of Tibetan Buddhism, but nonetheless, that's what developed on the basis of his teachings. So then Geshe Rabten says, therefore, the actual nature, the essential nature of Lama Tsongkhapa is the wisdom attribute of the Buddha. There are various ways of accomplishing and increasing wisdom. But this method, the practice of Guru Yoga in connection with Guru Manjushri, is the best method. It is the supreme method for the accomplishment of wisdom. Because we're working with the idea of our Guru. This is why Guru Puja is also very powerful. But in this, we're working specifically with Lama Tsongkhapa and Manjushri and trying to develop our wisdom through the force of the blessings and inspiration of these two beings that are, again, inseparable. Okay. This is the visualization that we're going to be going through shortly. I'll come back to it after we've gone through that. It's actually the first page also of one of the handouts that you'll get tomorrow in the mail. But let me go through the actual practice and kind of work with that. So I think, again, this was on your materials list that you should acquire. Do the download of that if you are inclined to do this practice. I think it's, again, a wonderful practice to do. We did it in the master's program most days as part of our beginning practice. So Lama Zopa has given some commentary that's inserted in here. He says, if this is your only daily Guru Yoga practice and you do not have a daily sadhana commitment, a sadhana commitment is one that you gain through taking tantric initiation. And sometimes there is a commitment that is given to practice a particular sadhana or practice. Means of accomplishment is the literal translation. If you don't know what that is, you probably don't have one then. But if you're not doing any other form of a Guru Yoga practice, he says, it is good to recite the prayers in the preliminary practice section, which is from pages 5 through 7, the next several pages, as they make the practice complete. But if you've already done these prayers in the context of another practice, then start with what's next, what's immediately following, taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. And then you go on to page 9 for the actual practice, okay? So it starts off with taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. Again, very common for our practices to start with this. It says visualize the objects of refuge, and you can do with a Buddha Shakyamuni and all the other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so on. But as it says here, you can do the elaborate visualization of one into many. That's found in this practice. It's called Jorcho, which is a very more complicated practice to do. You visualize Maitreya and the whole lineage of the vast, and then Manjushri and the lineage of the profound, and so on. It's described in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand as well. But or what most people do probably is do the simple visualization of many, meaning all of these various Buddhas, into one, in which all the objects of refuge are embodied in Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. So visualize Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. Again, I don't need to put up the image of the Buddha. I think we're all quite familiar with that. And then we would recite refuge, again, 3 times in English, Tibetan, or a mix of them as we do before the class, okay? I don't need to comment on that so much. I also won't comment so much on the 4 immeasurable thoughts because I'm pretty sure that Venerable Yonten spent a fair amount of time on these. These are the way that we moisten our minds to generate the motivation of bodhicitta. And each of these 4 immeasurable thoughts has 4 parts to it. As we can see, the 4 lines that are here for immeasurable equanimity, the first of the 4 immeasurables. And then we have immeasurable loving kindness and so on. There's a little bit of commentary from Lama Zopa. He does advise doing these 4 immeasurables as a Tonglen practice. So we can, with immeasurable equanimity, take away all of the disturbing thoughts, their attachment, their anger and hatred, and give them to our self-cherishing thought. And then for loving kindness, when we think about all beings being happy, we meditate on transforming our body into wish granting jewels, giving every sentient being what they need, and so on. And then we do immeasurable compassion. We go back to taking. We take upon ourselves all the suffering of others and so on, all the causes of suffering. And then with immeasurable joy or joyfulness, we meditate on giving all of our past, present, and future merits and their results to all beings. So those are the 4 immeasurables. Again, I won't talk so much about them because Venerable Yonten again has gone through those, I believe. Then we get to the 6th page of this booklet, and it's a wonderful graphic of Lama Tsongkhapa. All right, since this is a little bit closer, I might point out when we do get to the visualization, we see Lama Tsongkhapa as the central figure, and he's holding his hands at his heart in the what's called the teaching Dharma mudras. So both of the hands teaching Dharma. And then in his right hand is a lotus that upon which is a flaming sword, the flaming sword of Manjushri that represents the wisdom that cuts through ignorance. And then in his left hand, he's holding the stem of a lotus that has the, again, Prajnaparamita texts, the perfection of wisdom texts. And he's seated in the Vajra position, the lotus position, as it's sometimes called. And then on immediately below him or to either side, again, depending on how the visualization is done, are his two heart disciples. On the left, our left-hand side, his right is Gyaltsab Je, and then on his left, our right, is Kedrup Je. And these are both, they have their right hand in the mudra of teaching, and then their left hand is holding texts, meaning, again, the texts that they composed and explained, because they were also very amazing scholars, not quite as amazing as Lama Tsongkhapa himself, but nonetheless, that's going to be part of the visualization that we have. We get into the actual practice. We see that we begin with an invocation. Again, this is called Ganden Lagema, the 100 deities of Tushita. Tushita itself is said to be in a pure land. There are these pure lands that Tushita is sort of the sort of monastery that's a little bit outside of this pure land, is the way that they kind of refer to it. Not really technically a monastery, but like if you had a sort of town and then there was a monastery right outside of it, you can have the pure land abode where many beings abide. But then in this very special place that's just outside of there is Tushita, where Maitreya Buddha is abiding. And Lama Tsongkhapa comes from there in this visualization. So we have this invocation from the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of Tushita, meaning from Maitreya Buddha's heart. Maitreya is the next Buddha. That's why he is abiding in this Tushita realm. He's the 5th Buddha of these 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. Lama Tsongkhapa is actually said to be the 11th Buddha. He will appear as the 11th Buddha in this list of 1,000 Buddhas. So then it says, on the peak of a cloud resembling a clump of extremely white fresh curd, King of Dharma, omniscient Losang Drakpa is his ordination name, Lama Tsongkhapa. Please come here together with your sons, his sons, of course, being Gyaltsab Je and Kedrup Je. So we see Lama Tsongkhapa again as the main figure, and from the heart of Maitreya Buddha in this land of Tushita, there is sort of the cloud coming forth, and then the main cloud that Lama Tsongkhapa will be seated on, and then 2 clouds to either side that you have Gyaltsab Je and Kedrup Je seated upon. This is the visualization. And we want to think of these beings as, again, kind of perfect in the nature of light, but beings, not, just a 2-dimensional or even 3-dimensional, figure that's just without life. We want to think of them as living beings who are the embodiment of our own gurus appearing in the space before us. And I'll actually share a little bit of some commentary that comes from, I think this was from Geshe Rabten as well. But again, there's another visualization that, as I said, you'll have that in the set of materials you get tomorrow. So you can always use that as a visualization. This is from, again, Geshe Rabten. So on each golden throne supported by 4 lions is first a lotus disc or seat, whose nature is Lama Tsongkhapa's fully accomplished renunciation. This is often a very common thing that's used in these visualizations, is that the lotus represents renunciation, just like a lotus kind of comes from the muck of the water and rises above it. It kind of transcends all of that. It comes from samsara, from our experience of samsara, but helps us to attain the purified state of liberation. So this is what the lotus represents. So that's always the first cushion that they're seated upon is a lotus. On top of that is the cushion that is a moon disk, a flat moon disk or seat, whose nature is Lama Tsongkhapa's fully accomplished bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is compared to the moon because it pacifies all the suffering of the world. Then third, on top of that sits Lama Tsongkhapa, who himself is in the nature of wisdom in this visualization. Sometimes there is a sun disk that represents wisdom, that is a flat sun, and this is the sun that penetrates the darkness of ignorance. But here in this visualization, Lama Tsongkhapa is the nature of wisdom, the fully accomplished right view of shunyata, emptiness. Thus, these three, lotus, moon, and lama, symbolize the three principal aspects of the path. Again, I taught on that as part of the module on exploring the path. It's a wonderful short text by Lama Tsongkhapa himself on renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. So they are all three represented in Lama Tsongkhapa in these three objects, the Lama himself, as well as, again, the moon and lotus underneath him. Since the flourish, oh, whoops, I'm sorry, don't want to go on to that yet. I'm not yet at the limb of requesting to remain. So this is the initial thing that we do right at the beginning of this practice. After having done the preliminaries, we invoke Lama Tsongkhapa to come before us as the merit field together with Gyaltsab-je and Khedrup-je. So that's done in this first one. And by the way, I may try this when we do this next week. It's kind of hard to do the entire thing in chanting, though, because most of us don't know the Tibetan so well, and it's best if we just recite it in English so we can learn it. But there's a nice little melody that goes with this, and my chanting is horrible these days, but I'll try to give you just a little transmission of the melody with this first verse. Okay. Gaden lage gungi tuka nerab sar pungdre chutsin ser choki gyalpo kunken lo tsang drakse dang che pana dir. Wait, I did that wrong. Drakse dang se dang che pa ne dir sheksu. So I don't know, my voice is horrible. Anyway, I'll try to do a little bit of it next week. I'll be a little bit better prepared. But it's a nice little melody if you do want to chant the Tibetan. But I always encourage people, when you're becoming familiar with a new practice, recite it in English several times so that you know what you're chanting. One teacher I had said, if you're just chanting the Tibetan without a knowledge of what it is, it's the same as kind of meaningless speech. I don't know if it's quite that bad, but nonetheless, I think we need to be kind of conscious of what we're saying. Okay, so then what's interesting in this presentation of the seven limb prayer, all of you have studied the seven limb prayer with Venerable Yonten's teachings, is that we start with what is generally either the fifth or the sixth limb, depending upon the prayer itself. This is the request for the gurus to remain for a long time. In this, we usually visualize numberless replicas of ourselves, as it says there, each offering a beautiful golden lion throne meaning it's supported by these lions, adorned with jewels and a double vajra. A double vajra is this kind of represents the stability of a ground upon which the guru will abide. So in the verse, it says, in the sky before me, on a lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure guru smiles with delight. There's a whole commentary on that. If you look at note 8, as it's indicated there on that word pure, it's this whole concept of Jetsun, perfect pure guru. That's how it's translated here, Jetsun Lama. And you might read that. I don't want to go into all the detail. Lama Zopa always emphasizes that when we call our guru or Lama Tsongkhapa Jetsun, that there's a lot of wonderful connotations to these two words, Je and Sun. But again, I'm going to skip over that. You can read the footnote yourself. As a supreme field of merit for my mind of faith, please abide for hundreds of eons to spread the teachings. So we want these gurus to abide. Remember, that essentially, if these beings are all Buddhas from their side, they have no intention of abandoning us. Their whole, motive is to, free all sentient beings from samsara and lead them to enlightenment. So they're not intending to ever leave us on our own. But we have to create the causes from our side. We have to create the karma to continue to experience these beings in this world. So let me give you a little commentary from, this is from Geshe Rabten as well, about why this limb is first. Why is it taken out of order, the normal order that's in the seven limb prayer? Since the flourishing of the Dharma and the happiness of sentient beings is the supreme request, there is no request superior to it. Therefore, in this particular practice, it is placed here first. Generally in the seven limb puja, the request for the long life of the Lama or the Buddhas is the sixth of the seven limbs. Again, I have seen it in the fifth position in some, but generally the sixth. But here, because it is such an important request, it is explained first of all. So we've got this visualization of this Guru Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the essence of our own gurus, the essence of the wisdom of the Buddhas, Manjushri, all these beings. We want to make sure that they abide, that they continue to be here in this world. And that's why we make the request to remain right at the very beginning. So let's carry on with the other verses of the seven limb prayer. We have the limb of prostration, which is how it usually starts. This is usually the first limb. And you'll notice it's kind of an interesting way of setting out this limb of prostration. It's set out in terms of first prostrating to the holy mind of Lama Tsongkhapa and the Buddhas, our gurus, and then the holy speech, and then the holy body. And of course, if we look at how these are represented on our altars and what we say that they are embodying, we first, of course, have the statue of the Buddha, which represents the body of all of the enlightened beings. And then we have the texts, which represent the speech, but then it's the stupa that represents the mind. So here we're starting with the mind. Why? Because that is the essence of all the Buddhas. Of course, is their omniscient, pure mind. So here it says, your holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known, meaning that it is completely omniscient and has no faults whatsoever in regard to knowledge, wisdom, intelligence. Secondly, your holy speech, with its excellent explanations, the melodious qualities of a Buddhist speech and so on, is an ornament for the ears of those of good fortune. Not like an external ornament. The best ornament for the ears is the beautiful speech of a Buddha that adorns those ears with the perfect qualities of the Dharma. Then your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned, because the body of Tsongkhapa and all enlightened beings is imbued with the 32 signs, or 32 marks as they're sometimes called, and the 80 sort of secondary signs, secondary marks. 32 signs and marks. Sometimes, again, they use different names. I think it's the same term in Tibetan, sometimes called signs, sometimes called marks, but these represent all of what was developed on the path that is culminated in the body of a Buddha. So in essence, it's kind of interesting. Paying prostration in this way reminds us that the main goal that we want to achieve is the Dharmakaya, the wisdom mind of a Buddha. From that, then, we can engage in speech and activities through our physical presence in the world of beings. But we have to have the Dharmakaya, and we have to develop that through wisdom, the wisdom that Lama Tsongkhapa represents. So the last line, to you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Again, prostrations, Venerable Yonten, I'm sure, talked about. They're a very powerful way for us to accumulate merit and purify our negativities. Offerings, of course, also involved in accumulating great amounts of positive potential. And here we just visualize various offering substances that are mentioned, as well as those that we bring to mind and offer, those on our altars and wherever we visualize them. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, scented water, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I offer to you the supreme field of merit. So again, the limb of offering is a very important one. We shouldn't forget it as part of our practice. When we visualize offerings, we can think about things we've seen and things in nature and what have you, and think about offering them. When we are offering those actually arranged, those are what we think of as on our own altar or in the altars of centers and so on. Lama Zopa thinks about all the FPMT centers and the students of the FPMT and everything they have on their altars that are actually arranged, and offers those as well as these clouds that were of offerings that we're mentally imagining. Again, we offer to those the supreme field of merit, which again is our guru. The guru is the most powerful object according to the teachings on karma. So if we are seeing Lama Tsongkhapa and his spiritual sons as the essence of our gurus, then we are making that offering to the best merit field. Then we have the limb of confession. Of course, confession is a rather extensive practice. Whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to get it just to go up a little bit. Confession could be very involved, but we're not going to do it in such a long way as we do this seven-limb prayer. We just simply bring to mind whatever non-virtues of body, speech, and mind that we've collected from beginningless time, especially those opposite to the three vows, the pratimoksha, bodhisattva, and tantric vows. And we confess each and every one from our hearts with fervent regret. Of course, as we're reciting it, we don't have time to go through all four opponent forces, but we generate great regret. Think about being purified by relying upon Lama Tsongkhapa and as a field of purification as well. And so then again, we just think about that as a way of removing our negativities, our karmic obscurations in particular. Again, it's important to do a more extensive purification practice every day. No doubt every one of you do some form of purification at the conclusion of your day, Vajrasattva practice and so on. Then we have the limb of rejoicing, which is a way of increasing and creating more merit by thinking about the deeds that we and others have engaged in. So here it says, you strove, and we're talking here about Lama Tsongkhapa, you strove to accomplish much hearing in this degenerate age. I went through the 5 aspects of the degenerate age in the teachings on mind training, the Lojong texts. But we see that we're in an age where lifespan has greatly degenerated. The quality of things in terms of the time it takes to produce crops and so on is degenerated. The stature and so on, the physical strength of human beings has deteriorated. There's deterioration in terms of more afflictions and so on. It's a very difficult time we're living in. I'm not just talking about like this year or decade. We're talking about this whole part of an eon. We're in this amazing fortunate eon of all these Buddhas appearing, but it's quite degenerated from where it was when the eon was formed and so on. It says here, and when this realm was formed, the worlds were formed as part of the sort of abiding and development of this realm. So it says, you made your your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Of course, the freedoms and richnesses are referring to a human existence. And of course, even though Lama Tsongkhapa is seen as being a Buddha, we can think about him as a human being who exemplified how to use this perfect human rebirth, the freedoms and richnesses, the 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses, to make them meaningful by letting go of our worldly concerns. I've talked about the 8 worldly concerns before. There are preoccupation with material gain and avoiding material loss, with getting praise and avoiding criticism, with getting pleasure and comfort and avoiding the opposite, discomfort and so on. And then of course, getting a good reputation and avoiding a bad one. So Lama Tsongkhapa exemplified how to live a very meaningful human life. So then at the end it says, Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. And as part of this practice, we should ideally spend some time reflecting on Lama Tsongkhapa's amazing deeds and rejoicing in them, because again, he did amazing things. I'm going to just go through really briefly what are often called the 4 main deeds, the 4 great deeds of Lama Tsongkhapa. This is from a passage at Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives. Among those 4 that are mentioned in particular, the first was the renovation of the statue of Maitreya and the subsequent great festival that Lama Tsongkhapa organized during the Tibetan New Year in 1400 at Xingji Temple, which housed the statue of Maitreya. Then, continuing on, the second was an extensive teaching on the code of discipline, the Vinaya, for the ordained, which he, Rendawa, his guru, and Kyabchok Pelzangpo gave for several months at Namse Deng, thereby revitalizing the tradition of monasticism. It did say that monasticism had degenerated to some extent in Tibet prior to that, and so he really reinvigorated the monastic practice. That's why I think of all the 4 schools, I don't know statistically if it's true, it seems like there's a greater emphasis on monastic discipline within the Geluk. The third deed was his establishment of the Monlam, the great prayer festival in Lhasa in 1409, beginning a tradition that has continued until now of devoting the first 2 weeks of the Tibetan New Year. Most of you know this as the 2 weeks preceding the Day of Miracles that comes, exactly 2 weeks, the first full moon of the New Year after Losar. It culminates on the day of the full moon, that 15th to prayers for universal well-being. Tsongkhapa donated everything he himself had received from benefactors to support the Monlam, and offered ornaments made of gold and precious stones to the famous statue of the Buddha in the main temple in Lhasa. So again, very amazing deed, and that continues to this day, the Monlam festival. The fourth deed was the construction of Ganden Monastery near Lhasa. Ganden means the joyous. Again, the Tushita is often called Ganden, the joyous land, and is the Tibetan name given to the pure land of Maitreya. The monastery was completed and consecrated in 1410. In 1415, special halls were built to house selected mandalas. Under Tsongkhapa's guidance, skilled craftsmen created these mandalas and images of the relevant deities, which were installed in 1417. Unfortunately, all of that was destroyed after the Chinese occupation of Tibet in 1959. But again, the destruction of it doesn't mean that the merit is gone. Tsongkhapa, did this amazing deed of establishing Ganden Monastery. And Ganden now represents kind of the overall head of the three main Gelugpa monasteries, the Drepung, the Ganden, and the Sera. And so essentially we have, this tradition continuing today, even though it's not physically located at the monastery that Tsongkhapa established. But of course, we can think about all the amazing things Tsongkhapa did, the texts that he left behind that explain Sutra and Tantra so clearly. Again, there's no shortage of things we can rejoice in terms of Lama Tsongkhapa's amazing deeds. Next, we have the request to turn the wheel of Dharma. As it says here, this is a normal visualization for this request. The other one had us offering the thrones, and this one we visualized numberless replicas of ourselves in the form of Brahma, this god of the god realms, the form god realms, each offering a beautiful 1,000-spoked gold Dharma wheel. And if you have an actual small Dharma wheel, you can hold it up in your hands while reciting the verse and doing the visualization. And here again, we have to create the causes from our side for the gurus to continue to teach the Dharma. Perfect, pure, holy gurus, again, you would see the same footnote about perfect, pure, Jetsun. From the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, the wisdom mind of the Buddha, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the earth of those to be subdued exactly as they need. It's a very important part of the seven limb practice to create the causes for the Dharma to continue to flow in this world. Then lastly, we have the limb of dedication. Again, we skipped the other one because it was at the very beginning, the other request, which is normally the sixth limb in most presentations. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and may it especially cause the essence of perfect pure Losang Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. So we make a very special dedication as part of this Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. May it always benefit the teachings, especially of Tsongkhapa, to continue to abide in this world to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay, so that concludes the seven limb prayer. Most of you, again, have studied that before. Then we have the mandala offering. This is the same prayer that you've studied with Venerable Yonten, so I'm not going to go through it. It's just making, again, a vast pure offering, imagining the world according to this cosmology that's set out in Buddhism, but transformed into a beautiful pure land. And of course, you can recite a little prayer here that goes along with it, a requesting prayer that's written by the fifth Dalai Lama. And you can replace the first part of the prayer with that. And then, of course, you have this additional prayer of us being able to meet with these teachings and so on, of Losang Drakpa, Tsongkhapa's teachings. Again, very powerful. I won't go through that in so much detail because, again, it's just all about the same sorts of things that we are making that mandala offering for in general, to receive all the blessings and inspiration so we can accomplish this, accomplish the 2 stages of yoga and so on, the Bodhisattva's deeds. All right, so again, I'm not going to do so much commentary on those because we've done them before with Venerable Yonten. Now we're going to get into what's generally called the Miktsema. Miktsema is the 5-line prayer, sometimes set out in 9 lines and sometimes chanted in only 4 lines. That is a prayer of requests that we make and praise that we make to Lama Tsongkhapa. So I'll go through the visualization here, and then I want to go back to my slides and talk a little bit more about this whole idea of Tsongkhapa embodying all of these. But it says here, first visualize Lama Tsongkhapa, and we think of him being Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. Then Gyaltsab, who is Chenrezig, again, he's to our left, Tsongkhapa's right, and then Kedrupje, who is Vajrapani in the space in front of you. And then focus on Lama Tsongkhapa in particular. For this to become a guru yoga practice, it is important to maintain the awareness that your root guru is inseparable from Lama Tsongkhapa, who in essence is the three deities, all three of these that we just thought of these individuals being, but Tsongkhapa is all three. He is Manjushri, the embodiment of all the Buddha's wisdom, Chenrezig, or Avalokiteshvara in the Sanskrit, the embodiment of all the Buddha's compassion, and Vajrapani, the embodiment of all the Buddha's power. So those are the same three qualities we saw earlier, right? The Buddha's wisdom, compassion, and power. These are kind of the essence of all Buddhas. They have all three of those qualities complete, not lacking in any way. So let's go ahead and take a look at the slides, and I'll share a little bit more about kind of how these are meant to be seen in terms of the Lama Tsongkhapa being all three of these. This is from a slightly different commentary, but it's also included in that packet that you're going to get tomorrow that includes a couple of things from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives. This one you can read certainly, but I'm definitely wanting you to read the one by Geshe Rabten if possible. Sirkong Senchab Rinpoche says, when we recite this 5-line prayer, we make requests by seeing external resemblance, internal resemblance, and inseparability. So he goes through each of these. First, the external resemblance. We see that the emanation of the compassion of all the Buddhas is Avalokiteshvara, or again, Chenrezig in the Tibetan. And you, Je Tsongkhapa, resemble Avalokiteshvara. The emanation of the wisdom of all the Buddhas is Manjushri, and again, Je Tsongkhapa resembles Manjushri. The emanation of the power of all the Buddhas is Vajrapani, and you, Je Tsongkhapa, resemble Vajrapani. So there's this external resemblance that we're thinking of initially. These are, by the way, the three. They're often set out in this order of Chenrezig at the center and Manjushri to his right and Vajrapani to his left. This is just an image I got off the internet, but in many Gompas, they have all three of these beings kind of put together because they represent those three isolated qualities of a Buddha. Not that you ever find them without the other ones, that they're all three combined into what we mean by a Buddha. And so we're thinking of Tsongkhapa embodying all three, in other words, a fully enlightened being. And of course, thinking of our guru as being that as well, because all of these qualities are embodied in Tsongkhapa and our gurus. Now, the internal resemblance. Sirkong Senchab Rinpoche says, not only do you resemble them physically, but internally you also possess their qualities. Avalokiteshvara has infinite compassion, and you not only resemble him, but you also possess all of his qualities. Having that infinite compassion that is not excluding any single sentient being and wishing to protect every one of them from all suffering. Manjushri has omniscient wisdom, and you not only resemble Manjushri, but you also possess his great qualities. Vajrapani has great power, and you not only resemble Vajrapani, but you also possess his internal qualities. You have the same mind, insights, realizations as Vajrapani. So again, we see this, complete embodiment physically and internally in terms of these holy beings. Then the third aspect, inseparability. Naturally, you are inseparable from these three secret deities. You not only resemble them, you not only have the same knowledge that they have and qualities they have, but you are Avalokiteshvara, you are Manjushri, you are Vajrapani. So make these requests knowing that that Tsongkhapa and your gurus are inseparable from these three. So it's kind of an interesting presentation. I hadn't really seen that before. I thought I would share it because I think it is useful for us to have that kind of insight into what is going on when we are kind of observing Tsongkhapa as being these three beings. Secret means that just as a spy keeps secret and will not disclose his identity at any cost, although Je Tsongkhapa tried not to disclose, still we know his secret, that he is Buddha. That is, that he is these three deities. Je Tsongkhapa or any of your gurus have come in ordinary form. They're appearing in ordinary form, keeping their true identity secret. Though they are Buddha, they hide their real form and appear in ordinary form. Think, now I really understand your real form. Okay? So this is again an important part of what Guru Yoga what is entailed in it, and that of course is what you studied when you looked at the Guru Puja as well. We're trying to see this inseparability of Tsongkhapa or whatever being we're working with from our gurus. There's no difference in essence to those two, between those two. This is a key part of this view of holding our gurus as being Buddhas, as being enlightened beings. And that's how we achieve the realizations. That's how we also, accomplish everything on the path, is by holding that pure view. Again, that pure view I've talked about before. We went through it a little bit in the teachings on the path, exploring the path, but know that it's a key part of Mahayana Buddhism, in particular Tantric Buddhism. But nonetheless, it's a very powerful practice when we are thinking about Lama Tsongkhapa or the Medicine Buddhas or Tara or whoever we're working with in these practices as being inseparable from our own gurus. And in this case, because we're working with Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of this tradition, who appeared in that form, some 600 years ago, and is still alive in this world in his teachings, continuing to carry on this tradition through the Geluk tradition. We have an amazing ability to do that, make the best out of that relationship with the Guru and with Tsongkhapa then. So again, that was a little bit more extensive thing. We'll see now that we get into the initial visualization. There are kind of an initial one that we do, and then there are 7 wisdoms that we work on as part of this practice. And I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly, but the very first one is a visualization for purification, for cleansing away impurities. Here it says, by the force of my having fervently requested in this way from the hearts of the 3, the perfect pure Father and Sons, hollow beams of white light are emitted, and combining into one, they enter my crown. So there's like these 3, from the hearts of the 3 beings, there are hollow tubes of light that come together very shortly after they leave the hearts from those 3 beings, and they come into the crown of your head in a single tube, a single beam. All right. And then continuing with this visualization, it says, white nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing away all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and their imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. So another handout that you're going to get tomorrow is a little chart for the visualizations that you can use to kind of have at your side. This includes some commentary from my teacher, Geshe Jampa Gyatso, and you'll also receive his commentary on this practice. You'll notice some differences in some of what he says in terms of colors of things, but nonetheless, I wouldn't worry too much about those. So the first one, purification, we see that the white light comes down and those light rays wash away all our negativities, as we just saw. He said in particular, think about them exiting through the lower openings of your body in the form of like dirty black liquid, harmful black animals such as black scorpions and so on. Black in this context is a symbolic of the negativities that we are purifying through that practice. The benefit is that this dispels all our negativities, obscurations, and ignorance. Then we will go on to the 7 wisdoms. Let me talk a little bit about the 7 wisdoms before we go into the individual visualizations for each of those. Geshe Rapton says there are many different kinds of wisdom. This is going to just talk initially about the first 4. We have 7 presented, but the first 4 are the main ones that we do in this practice, and the other 3 can be done depending upon what activities you're involved in. First, we need what is called great wisdom. It's very, wisdom that is able to know all of the teachings of the Buddha and Tsongkhapa and so on. But it is not enough to simply have great wisdom. We also need what we call clear wisdom. He called illuminating wisdom, but it's a wisdom that is very clear, that knows things very precisely with great clarity. But neither are great wisdom and clear wisdom enough. We also need quick wisdom, very fast without taking time. Right? You want to have that kind of immediate ability to call things to mind and to know them so that the mind doesn't have any kind of dull spots in it. But neither is it enough to have those 3. We also need profound wisdom, which can dig deeply into our practice. Superficial wisdom is not of much benefit or use. It understands and realizes only that which is on the surface. It cannot plumb the depths. So this was again Geshe Rabten's explanation of why we need to do these recitations for these four types of wisdom: great, clear, quick, and profound. Okay, so let's go through the first of these, which is working with great wisdom. I'll go back to look at my chart here, and it says for that, we visualize orange. And my teacher, again, Geshe Champa Gyatso, said red could be the visualization here. But again, it doesn't, in our verse, it says orange. So I think it's perfectly fine to use orange throughout all of these seven wisdoms, whichever ones you do. For great wisdom, you have flowing nectar with atoms clarified in the form of bodies of Manjushri. And this causes realization of all objects of knowledge and understanding of all Lama Tsongkhapa's texts. By the way, I'm realizing I think I may have used another form of this. I might be updating this one a little bit before it comes to you tomorrow, but that's the first visualization for great wisdom. Let's go back to Lama Tsongkhapa's comment, or the Guru Yoga. Again, this is just a little more commentary on what you're purifying when you do the first one, especially activities we've done in relation to the Guru. And it says, then continue to recite miksemas while doing these visualizations for achieving the seven wisdoms. The advice that's being given as part of this practice is to spend more time on that first part, though, purifying negative karmas, than on achieving the wisdoms. Again, if you can possibly do 3 malas of miksema, do 2 for cleansing and then 1 while you're doing the various visualizations for these wisdoms. So this is the 5-line prayer, by the way. I don't know that I need to say much about it. Chenrezig, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, meaning compassion that sees sentient beings as empty of inherent existence. Manjushri, master of that stainless wisdom that knows things as they are. Vajrapani, or often called the Lord of Secrets, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, all of the kind of forces that are able to obstruct us that we want to disempower. Tsongkhapa, crown ornament of the sages of the land of snow. Losang Drakpa, at your holy feet I make requests. So again, this is a sort of praise of Tsongkhapa that is also a request to help us on our path. That again, all the first 3 lines are the 3 Buddhas that are embodied in Tsongkhapa. So that's what you actually recite. Of course, most people in the Tibetan, it's much easier to recite, I think, than in the English. If you can memorize the Tibetan, that's best. Next week when we get together, we'll do it maybe once in the Tibetan here and there, and then we'll just do a couple in the English. I don't think we'll have time to do this full extensive practice. It can take quite a while. So again, we have the visualization for achieving the 7 wisdoms, the first being great wisdom. As was said, these first 4 we should ideally do every time we do this practice, and then the other 3 depending on what we're actually trying to accomplish. As it says here in this verse, please bless me to achieve great wisdom, which is unimpeded in discerning the meanings of the infinite scriptures. Then that's kind of the request to Tsongkhapa. Once again, great wisdom flows forth in the form of orange nectar, whereby my body is filled. Light radiates from the atoms of the nectar, which are clarified in the form of perfect pure Manjushri. So we see kind of this orange nectar. It consists of atoms that each are in the form of a perfect pure Manjushri. There's a picture of Manjushri next to this to help us with our visualization as we go through. The great wisdom of the victorious ones of the 10 directions and their sons absorbs into me in the form of bodies of the deity whereby my body is filled. So from those Manjushris that are in the orange nectar that has completely filled you, it kind of goes out and hooks, these light rays hook all the great wisdom of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions and their sons, and those absorb back into you in the form of bodies of the deity. Whereby your body is filled with all of these kind of miniature manjushris that are all the essence of great wisdom of all the Buddhas that you've kind of drawn into your visualization. I gave another little kind of in the slides, Geshe Rabten's talking about this. He says the atoms of Amrita or nectar appear in the form of Manjushri. Here we visualize that the atoms of Amrita are in the form of small Manjushri, so our body contains countless small forms of Manjushri. From these Manjushris in our body, light emanates and goes out in all 10 directions. Again, the 10 directions are north, south, east, west, and then the intermediate directions, northeast, and so on. And then there's the up and down. Those constitute the last two. Then this invites and brings back to us the great wisdom of all the Buddhas in the form of countless Manjushris in all sizes. They absorb into us through all parts of our body. This is a beautiful visualization, like rain on a lake, or sometimes they say like snow on a lake. It just immediately absorbs into the body of water. It's as if all the raindrops are completely absorbed into the lake. We must meditate strongly that we have received the power of the great wisdom of every Buddha within us. So we're going to have a similar visualization for each of these. The first one, though, is the only one that's in the form of Manjushris. Great wisdom is represented by the form of Manjushri here. That one we'll come back to in a moment. Let's go on, carry on with the practice. Go to the next wisdom. Next wisdom being clear wisdom. In the text that we're going to recite, it says, "Please bless me to achieve clear wisdom, which clarifies the detailed, subtle, and difficult vital points without mixing them up." Again, we have that kind of clarity to what we're knowing, everything being very crystal clear and not without any doubt or mixing up of points. Once again, clear wisdom flows forth in the form of orange nectar. So now we have clear wisdom. Before it was great wisdom. Here, our body is filled, and light radiates from the atoms of the nectar, which are clarified this time in the form of arapatsana. Aparapatsama, om arapatsana di is kind of the mantra of Manjushri in total. They usually put an om in front of it. And so here it's arapatsana. Usually it's om arapatsana. And then again, the D syllable we're going to see in the next one. But what we have on the screen there is the ara, pa, sa, na. And so again, the om is missing. And in all the explanations, it says to include the om. But nonetheless, it's not in the actual verse. But it says here, in the form of these 5 or 6 syllables, the clear wisdom of the victorious ones of the 10 directions and their sons absorbs into you in the form of those mantras, those syllables, whereby your body is filled. So again, this is the main part of the mantra of Manjushri, Omarapatsana, and then again, D is the seed syllable that's added at the end. But this is the second visualization. Let's go to my little chart. Again, it says there, for clear wisdom, you visualize orange nectar with atoms clarified in the form of the mantra of Manjushri, Omarapatsana, and again, that's with the om in it. Or my teacher again said the syllables of the Miksema prayer. Again, I had another version of this where I took that out to keep it a little bit simpler. So I might end up sending you the more simplified one, but just know that some people say that you can also use the syllables of the Miksema prayer, but there's a lot of syllables in that prayer. So I think it's easier to use the 5 or 6 syllables we have here. What does that do? What's the benefit? It dispels the ignorance of not knowing. It causes realization of all phenomena of both what's called the thoroughly purified class and the ever diluted class, and their subtle aspects clearly and without any confusion. So you have that kind of clear wisdom that embodies that. Then we have the quick wisdom. That'll be the third one. We'll go to the prayer in a moment. Here, my teacher said this could be visualized as blue. Geshe-la said that, but again, in our prayer, it says orange. That orange nectar comes into you with atoms clarified in the form of the orange D seed syllables. This is, again, the seed syllable of Manjushri, and it's the last one of the mantra when it's usually recited, Omarapatsana D. And this purifies obstacles to realizations, purifies our wrong realizations and doubts regarding realizations, so that we again have that quick wisdom. Let's go back to the practice and we'll go through that. Here in the prayer, we begin with that request, please bless me to achieve quick wisdom, which quickly cuts through non-understanding, misunderstanding, and doubt. Once again, quick wisdom in this case flows forth in the form of orange nectar, whereby your body is filled. Light radiates from the atoms of the nectar, which in this case are clarified in the form of the orange syllable D. Again, this is what D looks like on the right there of this verse. The quick wisdom of the victorious ones of the 10 directions and their sons absorbs into you in the form of the seed syllables, whereby your body is filled. So again, it's a rather elaborate visualization, but everyone is the same in terms of what you are doing. You visualize that nectar coming in, it's clarified in the form of some object, and then we send out light from that that hooks all of that particular wisdom of the Buddhas and draws it back in that same form that we've been visualizing the nectar clarified in the form of. Okay, that was the third. The fourth is profound wisdom. Please bless me to achieve that which is an unfathomable in discerning the meanings of the scriptures. Once again, profound wisdom flows forth in the form of orange nectar whereby my body is filled. And again, here we're going to visualize it as a sword and text, scripture. Light radiates from the atoms of the nectar, which are clarified in the form of texts and swords. The profound wisdom of the victorious ones of the 10 directions and their sons absorb into you in the form of the hand implements. These are Tsongkhapa's hand implements, right? He's got the sword in the right hand and the text in the left. Again, so those are the two main implements of Manjushri as well as Tsongkhapa, and thereby your body is filled with those. All right, the visualization. Again, orange flowing nectar with atoms clarified in the form of texts and swords produces understanding of the words of all the scriptures. Again, and eliminates all of our any misunderstanding, what have you. Deepens your understanding, makes it more profound. All right, then we have the last three, which are called the wisdom of explaining, debating, and composing. And what it said is when you do this practice, if you are engaged in one of those activities, such as someone who you want to be able to explain the text to others, to be able to pass along the meaning of what Tsongkhapa taught and so on, well, then you might engage in that additional practice. But if you're more involved in debating or discussing text with others and you want to be sharp and clear in what you say in the midst of those debates, then you want that one. Wisdom of composing, as if you are actually composing texts and so on. So here, again, we're going to have three different visualizations. The first one is going to have atoms clarified in the form of the text that you are actually studying, that you want to be able to explain. That will enable you to explain the meaning of those scriptures without any doubt. Then we have the flowing nectar. This is a rather complicated one. Atoms clarified in the form of 6-spoked wheels with swords as the spokes and the handles meeting at the center with the syllable D in the center, with Omarapatsana, those 6, on a moon disk above each sword. And the wheels turn clockwise, cutting all ignorance. So you're having this kind of rotating wheel with the mantra on it and these swords with the edge facing outward that is cutting all of our ignorance so that we have that ability to immediately say what needs to be said in our debating. This cuts the ignorance of not knowing and the doubts that cause one to lose debates and enables one to defeat all those who hold wrong views and clear up their net of doubts. The last, the wisdom of composing. Here we have the visualization of the flowing orange nectar with atoms clarified in the form of volumes of texts and wheels of sorts. So we have many of these to support us in our composing. It cuts our ignorance of not knowing in general and the ignorance regarding the composition of texts. And the one that I'll send you as well, it will still have this at the bottom. This is again the Om Marapatsana D, the final syllable there. That's the seed syllable. So you have that also to refer to for your visualizations on there. Let's go on to look at briefly each of these. Wisdom of explaining. Please bless me to achieve the wisdom of explaining. Once again, the wisdom of explaining flows forth in orange nectar. And then again, the visualization we saw for that was in the form of the text that we are studying, the text that we are explaining, which again will have the same process of sending out the light rays from those texts that are in the atoms of the nectar, and then it brings back the wisdom of explaining of all the Buddhas and so on that absorb into you. Then we have the next one, which is the wisdom of debating, which thoroughly deprives evil propounders of their self-confidence. It flows forth in the form of that orange nectar, clarified. This is what they have as the visualization, but it's a little different again than what was on the chart that I showed you. It's a form of wheels of swords. Again, we do see the sharp edge to this, but it's got actually 8 And again, the one that I explained to you had 6. So that's why I've included in your materials and the slides for tonight, this wonderful image that Andy Weber did this painting of Manjushri's mantra. So you can think about these syllables of the mantra standing up. Again, they were on a moon disk according to the visualization that I showed you. But Om is at the top. They're on that first blue sword that's pointing outward. Om. Um, Om Arapatsana Di. It's got a slightly different version of Ah there, but essentially this is the 6 syllables of the mantra and then D in the center. But this is a better, in my mind, a little bit more accurate visualization of what we are looking at. Again, the swords, all the 6 swords that are rotating, that are facing out, that we absorb into us, that are cutting all of the ignorance that obscures our being able to debate proficiently. But anyway, this is I think a better visualization all in all for you to use for that than the way that it was just described in this, or how it looks in this visualization here. But again, there's nothing wrong with using this. I don't know where this came from, so I don't have an ability to say for sure. But this is a little bit different, again, with the sword at the center and then 8 spokes around. And then the mantra isn't even on there. So wisdom of composing. Again, we have the same sort of request, the wisdom of composing that gives rise to a joyous, clear understanding of the excellent words and their meanings. The wisdom of composing flows forth in the form of orange nectar. Here it's clarified, the atoms clarified in the form of texts and wheels. So again, that was the wheel that they used up above. You could use the one that I showed you. You'd have that wheel and text, many of these that are all coming in, and they again draw in all of the wisdom of composing of the Buddhas and so on. So again, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on those 3, and you don't necessarily even have to do any of them. The main 4, great, quick, clear, and profound wisdom are the ones that maybe should be emphasized as part of the practice. And that's what we'll do next week. We'll spend just a bit of time on each of those. Then there is a request at the tail end of this. May my wisdoms of listening, reflecting, and meditating increase. May my wisdoms of explaining, debating, and composing develop. May I be granted the supreme and common realizations. Please bless me to quickly become like you. You recite this 3 times. And I'll go to a little explanation of these requesting verses in a moment. Actually, no, I'm sure that's actually not an explanation of that. It's an explanation later at the tail end of the practice. I'm sorry. Then we have a second requesting prayer. May my transcendental wisdom of simultaneously born great bliss arise. This is referring to highest yoga tantra, wisdom united with bliss. May my stains of mistakenly grasping things as real be purified. May my net of doubts that is only mind be cut. All of these doubts that are just purely concepts we have in our minds that are mistaken, may they all be cut. Please bless me to quickly become like you. So this is again a way of making that connection and seeking the request through our request, seeking the blessings and inspiration to become like our gurus. Then there's a prayer that most of you are familiar with, Foundation of All Good Qualities. It's the other short Lam Rim prayer that that Lama Tsongkhapa composed. The 3 principal aspects of the path kind of includes the Lam Rim in by virtue of those 3 concepts of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom of emptiness. But this is a more detailed one looking at all the various teachings of the Lam Rim. So we won't go through that because, again, I think most of you have encountered that prayer before. This is actually added by Lama Zopa Rinpoche in this practice. It's not technically part of the practice as it was originally developed, but nonetheless, Rinpoche feels it's good to do that as a sort of glance meditation on the Lam Rim, similar to what we do in the beginning practice that we went through last week, the method to transform a suffering life into happiness. So next week we will skip over that because we will have already done a glance on meditation on the Lam Rim. These are the prayers that I will have a little more commentary on. The request for the Guru to abide at the heart. Now, what I want to say before we get into this is that there is a more extensive way of doing this that's taught in Highest Yoga Tantra, and it actually does appear in the commentary by Serkong Sanchab Rinpoche that's at Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives website, but it's actually excluded from what you're going to receive tomorrow. It's really best to only read that and do that visualization if you have Highest Yoga Tantra practice, because there's a unique way of doing the absorption, the dissolution of the Guru into your heart. But there's going to be a more common one that we'll go through here that is explained in the practice. So I just might want to mention that before we get into this. And maybe again, Venerable Yonten even mentioned that because there's also an absorption in the Guru Puja. It starts with this verse, that we actually might recall from our daily practice that we went through, the method to transform a suffering life. Magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide in the lotus and moon at my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and grant me the realizations of your holy body, speech, and mind. So we do visualize Lama Tsongkhapa coming to the crown of our head before we have the actual absorption. That's where we say, there's a second verse, magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide in the lotus seat, lotus and moon at my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and grant me the supreme and common realizations, a second level of request. Magnificent and precious root Guru, please abide on the lotus and moon at my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and remain steadfast until I attain the essence of enlightenment. So as it says here, if you've not received a highest Yoga Tantra initiation, visualize that the two disciples, Gyaltsabche and Khedrubche, absorb into Lama Tsongkhapa, their thrones absorb into his throne, and then Lama Tsongkhapa's throne absorbs into Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa himself melts into brilliant light that absorbs into your forehead, that point between the eyebrows, and blesses your body, speech, and mind. If you have received a highest Yoga Tantra initiation, do the visualization of the Guru entering your heart, which again is set out by Serkong Sensha Rinpoche in that passage at the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives. If you do a search for it, you can find it out there on lamayeshe.com. Then we have the dedications, but let me go to the slides. I think I have a little bit more that I wanted to share on those last few verses, just to conclude things. Oh, actually, I didn't include that in here. Sorry. I think I ended up taking it out because I saw that actually what was explained by Lama Zopa in those is probably good enough. Yeah, let me come back to this benefits because I want to kind of conclude with that. Let me just go through briefly what we have in dedication prayers. We have this first prayer: by the force of the victorious one Tsongkhapa, acting as my direct Mahayana virtuous friend in all my lives, may I never turn away for even a second from the pure path highly admired by the victorious one. So this is quite specific to this practice of Tsongkhapa. May I be able to live a life of pure morality, listen to many teachings, train in bodhicitta, and have pure view and conduct without corrupting the teachings of Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, the second victorious one, the second Buddha. Glorious Guru, whatever your holy body, retinue, lifespan, and realm, whatever your supreme and beneficial holy name, may I and others become exactly like that. Then we have additional dedications that Lama Zopa has added. I won't go through all of these. Again, Lama Zopa loves to do recitations of dedication prayers at the end, as many as we can possibly think of, prayers for the good health and long lives of our gurus, and so on. Really not too many there, but nonetheless, a few that you can do. You can certainly do more dedication prayers if you wish. You are going to get a little handout that contains some of this. Lama Zopa Rinpoche did a book, there's a book of his teachings on Gana Lagema, Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. And there's just a little bit more about benefits, but I wanted to share this little bit with you before we conclude tonight. It says, in my opinion, to have the opportunity to practice this great holy being's yoga is in general even more fortunate than having the opportunity to receive other teachings and the opportunity to do other Dharma practice. Attempting the Guru Yoga practice of the inseparability of your own root Guru and Lama Tsongkhapa establishes the root of all happiness from this life up to enlightenment. Attempting this Guru Yoga practice is that which causes all the teachings that you listen to, reflect on, and meditate on to go to the right point, which means to be of benefit. Every single teaching of the Buddha, both Sutra and Tantra, is only for the purpose of subduing your own mind. That's the only purpose. So whatever you do, listening, reflecting, meditating, everything, remember those are the three ways we acquire wisdom: through listening, reflecting on those teachings, and then meditating on them. All of that is to subdue our own mind. This Guru Yoga practice does that. Its purpose is to direct your mind so that listening is not outer listening, reflection is not outer reflection, meditation not outer meditation, rather that they are inner practices and thus subdue your mind. Okay. So hopefully that's inspiring enough for you to see a bit of this practice. When we go through it next week, I'll try to add some comments when I can. Again, you have the full visualizations on that chart. Let me tell you what else. This is the commentaries you'll get tomorrow. Again, this was compiled through teachings from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, but I don't actually know who the compiler was. I got it from Venerable Yonten, but you'll see again, there's quite a few pages in this. I think it's about 50 pages. So then you'll get this tomorrow as well. These are the recommendations of what you can do for additional resources. Again, all of these in the box are for written references. You'll get the PDF of all of those, so you won't have to look them up anywhere. And then these are some additional books, the two I mentioned on Tsongkhapa's life, and then the two published commentaries on God and Lagema that are out there, but I think both of them are out of print. So you have a very hard time finding them, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I just wanted to at least give you those so that you know that they are out there. Okay, and then there's a few other handouts I think that you're going to get that are the actual documents. So, whoops. Let me stop the share and come back to that. Any questions before we conclude tonight on this practice or anything I've talked about? And I know a lot of you have, oh yes, is that Maka?
Yeah.
Hi, Maka.
So, hi. This is a practice. Like, would people do this for maybe 6 weeks at a time, or
Yeah.
How would that work out in daily life or daily practice, or
Yeah. I mean, it is nice if you can do it as a daily practice, like forever, to just start it and continue to do it. Because obviously, if you're in this tradition of the Gelug studies and you're studying Tsongkhapa's texts or those related to Tsongkhapa and so on, but I think it's really ideal to do it. When we're in the master's program, again, we started off at least, I don't know that we carried on for the full 7 years, but we did this practice together as a way of kind of creating that sort of karma with Tsongkhapa, since we depended upon many of his teachings or Gyaltsub Je's teachings, Kedrup Je's teachings, and so on. So it is ideal for those in this tradition to do this on a daily basis, but I know many of us have other practices, other things we want to do with our time. So it might be something that you just do maybe once a week, or that you could do, every now and then when you feel like kind of having an alternate practice to what you normally do. If you have commitments that you already do, though, make sure that you maintain those commitments before you do this practice. So if you've given, again, have other sadhanas, other things that you need to recite, make sure that you don't, bite into those. Those are important to keep up because you've made the commitment to doing those on a daily basis. Certainly what you're suggesting, Maka, of doing it for some period of time to get quite familiar with it is not a bad idea. Maybe, take a couple of weeks and say, I'm just going to do this every day to try it on and see what it's like. Again, they talk about reciting one mala of this 5-line prayer. I mean, that's a lot. If you do 3 malas, that's quite a lot. If until you really memorize it and are able to say it really quickly, it's going to take some time to do this practice. I would encourage just doing a short amount of the mantras initially, just to try it on and see what it's like. And then you can increase the number of recitations that you do with regard to these wisdoms and the visualization, the purification, what have you. But yeah, it's not a bad idea to maybe do it for some period of time, so you actually kind of, try it on, see what it's like. And if you decide to carry it into your daily practice, and you always can, or you can go back to it, like I said, on once a week or once a month or whatever feels good to you. Again, Lama Zopa recommends this practice because, like as he said in the benefits, there's really a lot that we can gain from practicing Guru Yoga in that way. But does that help a little bit?
Yeah. And I came a little bit late, so I know with the green Tara, when I think like she's there to remove obstacles. So what would be the essence of this practice? Like, what's it good for?
Well, again, all of these practices help in a variety of ways. The Guru Yoga of Tsongkhapa is essentially working with the wisdom aspect and trying to remove all of what obscures our wisdom and the various wisdoms that we went into to be able to develop. So there is that kind of emphasis with this practice, much more so, the wisdom and Manjushri kind of side of things, versus Green Tara being about removing obstacles and being able to engage in beneficial activities. And then, of course, you can do a practice of Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvara, where you're mostly working on developing compassion. But again, the visualization with Tsongkhapa embodying all three qualities of compassion, wisdom, and power kind of covers all bases in a sense. So it's not to say that it's a better practice than Green Tara. It seems to be more comprehensive in terms of what we're trying to do, even though wisdom is the main practice that we're working with.
Okay. That's what I want to know.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right, so again, next week, next Tuesday, what we're going to do is go through like from as if we were starting our day with the blessing of the speech and that recitation of the Lam Rim prayer and so on to set our motivation. Then we'll go into the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga and we'll insert in there on the limb of offering. We'll stop and just do a brief, extensive light offering. If you want to bring some lights or have electric lights where you're at, have candles lit where you're at, do that ahead of time so that they're all ready. We don't have to stop and light candles and what have you. And then we'll kind of continue with the practice. As I said, we won't have time to do extensive recitations of the Miksema and what have you, but we'll do the best that we can. And then we'll try to conclude with the King of Prayers. I might be very ambitious in what I'm trying to accomplish in 90 minutes, but I'll try to do a dry run of it ahead of time to make sure I can do it. I know it's harder when you're kind of in the space of all of this, and I sometimes then start talking about things that to add some kind of visualizations and things like that, instruction on that. But all right, good. Thank you for attending tonight. Let's go ahead. I don't know if there was something in the chat box. Oh, just a thank you. You're very welcome. And let's go to the prayers that we normally do at the end of these teachings. Again, that'll come up in just a moment. There we go. And we'll begin with the two dedication prayers that are on the screen. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Then we do the prayers for our precious teachers. I think we have time to do all three of these tonight for His Holiness Lama Zopa Rinpoche and then Osalhita Lama Yeshe's reincarnation. But as usual, I encourage you that when you're reciting these three prayers, don't think of only these three beings having good health and long lives, continuing to be in this world to benefit us. Think of all spiritual guides, those we are connected with as well as those that others are connected with. Whatever spiritual tradition they're practicing, may they continue to have guides that perfectly lead them on a path of well-being. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us, in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. And lastly, we dedicate for all those beings that we're holding in our hearts. Every one of us knows beings who are in difficult situations right now, dealing with obstacles to their well-being, having health problems, illness, and so on, as well as those that we might know who are dying or who have died recently. Thinking about them, send this positive energy out to them and let it become the cause for them to be free from their suffering and all the causes of their suffering, and also for them to attain peerless happiness, having all the causes and conditions that will allow them to attain that. And may all beings have these same results: freedom from suffering, complete perfect happiness through what we have done here tonight. All right, thank you all for joining me tonight for this and joining each other here in the virtual Gompa. And Excuse me, if you do get a chance, please try to work with this Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga on your own, just also to see what questions you have. I'm hoping I also have a little time to answer any questions at the end. But if there is something that comes up for you, please pass along the question to your coordinator from your center or directly to me if you have my email address. I think I put it in the chat box a couple sessions ago. But just know that, yeah, I'm happy to answer those questions and make sure that you have an opportunity to ask them. So, all right, everyone, have a good week. Be well, and I'll see you then.
Thank you so much.
Right.